Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's review, we are going to be reviewing a couple different milk stouts. Milk stouts are like standard stouts, but they are brewed with lactose, hence milk, which imparts a sweetness into the beer. We've got two different brewers today. The first will be from Saugatuck Brewing Company. This is their Neapolitan milk stout. So chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, if you don't know what Neapolitan is. 6% ABV on this one. They are based out of Douglas, Michigan. And then number two is the Duck Rabbit Milk Stout. 5.7% ABV on that one. They are based out of Farmville, North Carolina. So two completely different milk stouts. One's flavored, one's just a base milk stout. ABVs very close to one another, so I'm curious to see what makes them different. And this is a very, very popular beer style indeed. We haven't done too many, if any, milk stouts yet on this channel, and I am anxious to get more done. There are plenty out there to try, so this is the first full milk stout review we are doing, and these are two very popular ones right now. So we will get started with the Saugatuck Brewing's Neapolitan Milk Stout. Okay, so jumping straight into our first beer of today's milk stout review, we've got the Saugatuck Brewing Neapolitan Milk Stout. Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry are the flavors in Neapolitan. 6% ABV on this one, again out of Douglas, Michigan. Nothing too interesting really about the bottle art other than it looked kind of old-timey, like 1950s, 60s kind of art, such as one might find on an ice cream carton. Indeed, Neapolitan is most famously an ice cream flavor. Very pink label to boot. Nonetheless, let's get this poured into the glass. Okay, it doesn't look super thick, but it looks dark. Actually quite effervescent. So I don't expect that head to hold too well, being that it is so effervescent, and indeed it's already breaking away. Hold up to the light. It is not an imperial stout, so it's not going to be pitch black, but it's very, very dark. Only the slightest hint of light coming through, so it looks great. The head indeed did collapse pretty quickly, but it's still got just a little pad floating on top, and it's going to cling to the sides quite well. Let's jump in for a sniff. Wow. Okay, so that actually does smell very much like Neapolitan. You can smell the chocolate and vanilla, but the dominant aroma coming through is actually the strawberry. I'm kind of surprised by that, and I didn't anticipate it. This ought to be really interesting since milk stouts are brewed with lactose, which will sweeten up a beer. Having kind of Neapolitan flavors in there might actually come through quite well into the beer. So I'm really excited to try this one. I think this is maybe the second or third brew that I've tried by Saugatuck. The last ones I've had, I have very much enjoyed. So let's see if this one keeps the trend going. Let's jump right in. Oh man. You almost have to taste it to believe it. But this is exactly as advertised. This tastes just like Neapolitan ice cream in beer form. It absolutely does. You can taste almost in equal parts chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry, and it is a milk stout. It does have that lactose in it, and it is sweet. So the flavors come through as they would say in the ice cream flavor, and it's got that sweetness, so you can really taste. The strawberry in particular is really interesting and is very enjoyable because it's got that sweetness to it, so it tastes correctly like the flavor. This is really, really well done. They could not have named or nailed this beer better if they tried. This is exactly as advertised. It tastes like Neapolitan milk stout. I mean, this is a home run for exactly what they were trying to get. Let's jump in for some body and mouthfeel and finish. The body is medium. It's not super heavy, 6%. You wouldn't expect it would be super duper heavy. The mouthfeel is very creamy and pretty effervescent too. It's exactly as you'd expect. The finish up front comes on very strongly, very sweet. That classic milk stout character, that sweetness that you don't get pretty much in any other stout style or beer style. It's got to be these lactose added, or some of the sours will have natural sweetness, but you get a really nice even blend of all of the flavors. None of them overpower or overshadow any of the others, and it comes immediately behind that sweetness. And you also do get the really nice standard stout malt bill back base. The Neapolitan flavors are dominant, probably 85%, to the malt base flavors, which you can taste about 15%. And it's a very, very even bell curve. It's sweet, flavor bloom, mixed with malt, and I mean, it doesn't really peter off like a standard bell curve shape, just decreases in intensity, but it stays completely even all the way across, and it's got a pretty long finish. I can still taste that strawberry, chocolate, and vanilla, and just the slight undertone of that malt base. This is so well balanced. It's so well done. This is an A+ for an attempt at making a Neapolitan beer. They absolutely nailed it. This is very, very enjoyable beer. If you're not really into bitter or deeply roasted edge stouts or beers in general, you like the sweeter ones, this would absolutely be worth trying. I can highly recommend this. I don't normally go for milk stouts. I tend to like more bitter beers, though I enjoy all beers, but this one is particularly enjoyable. This is absolutely well done. I'm going to take my time, finish sipping on this one while I come up with my scores, and when we come back, we'll jump over to the Duck Rabbit, their milk stout, 5.7% ABV out of Farmville, North Carolina. Okay, now we move on to the second beer of today's milk stout review. This is the Duck Rabbit's Milk Stout, 5.7% ABV on this one out of Farmville, North Carolina. Now, the label art. In case you're wondering about the name, the Duck Rabbit, not sure how well the camera's picking this up. It might have some glare from the set lights, but if you look at this picture, to some people, it looks like a rabbit with the rabbit face over here, the eye over there, and its ears flop back. But if you look at it from the opposite direction, it's the back of a duck's head, then an eye, and then the duck bill. So it's just a play on that old optical illusion, in case you're wondering about the name, the Duck Rabbit. Nonetheless, that's about the extent of how interesting the label is. So let's get this poured into the glass. It looks about as thick as the Neapolitan Milk Stout. And this one's pretty effervescent too. Maybe not quite as much as the Neapolitan, but we got it in there. Up to the light, this is actually pretty much the exact same depth of intensity of color as the last one, which is to say Picture Perfect Stout. They are not Imperials, they're just standard stouts, and they look just as you would expect. Very effervescent, as I said, and indeed you can see that head's already collapsed. It's not on a nitro tap. That's about as good as it gets at home on an effervescent stout like that. But let's give it a sniff. Okay, now right away, this smells completely different than the Neapolitan stout as you would expect. There's no vanilla, strawberry, chocolate in this one. This is just a base milk stout. The aroma is not anywhere near as pungent as it was on the Saugatuck, but when you do get in there and you breathe in deeply, what you get are the malts, and it smells like deep, richly roasted malts as you'd expect in a stout. Again, not a very pungent aroma at all, but it does smell good when you finally get a whiff of it. It smells a little bit like coffee, though this is obviously not a coffee stout. No coffee in this milk stout, but it smells good. Let's jump in. Okay, a completely different milk stout drinking experience. They are completely different. Same style, completely different beers. Up front on this one, You do get that slight sweetness you expect in a milk stout, though it's not as sweet as the Neapolitan was. And then what hits you next is the malt characteristic. And it does have very deep, richly roasted malts, but just like the Samuel Smith, the Celebrated Oatmeal Stout we just reviewed an episode or two ago, this imparts some smokiness, some kind of peaty, smoky, almost Rauch beer-like quality malt characteristic in the back. So I don't know if they actually used any smoked malts or peated malts in this, but it definitely gives that impression. And it's kind of interesting in a milk stout. The sweetness from the milk stout, from the lactose, actually takes some of the edge off of that smoky quality, and it just adds an extra layer of flavor. But it's definitely in there. Body on this one is actually medium light. It's a much lighter body than the Neapolitan. 0.3% ABV lower. Okay, it's lower, but not by that much. It's got a significantly less substantial body to it. The mouthfeel, not quite as creamy, but it feels like a stout should. It has a little bit more viscosity than the Neapolitan milk stout did, though I wouldn't classify it as a viscous stout by any stretch of the imagination. It's just got a little bit more thickness. The flavors, due to that thickness, surprisingly don't really stick around the palate all that much. And honestly, the finish on this is pretty short. It's clean, but it's short. It's really just sweetness up front, then opening into the malts, and the malts develop into a very deep, rich, roasted and smoky edge, and that sweetness comes back, they kind of meld together again, and then it tapers off. And it's gone probably within about 10 seconds of each sip. So it's not a very long finish, but it is very clean. This is a good beer, and it's certainly a good milk stout. It's not a style that I personally go for, but I certainly appreciate what they're doing with this style and can understand their popularity. This is a well-done example. It's got all the hallmarks of a classic milk stout that you would expect without being over the top. It's very well balanced. There are elements about this that are completely different and from the Saugatuck that we explored. And, again, this is the beauty of beer. Taking a few different beers of the same style from different brewers and just seeing what's out there. That's part of this that's really fun. This is another good stout. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores, and when we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we have gotten to get and dig deep into both of these beers, we're going to get them both ranked top to bottom on our scale. Starting with the Saugatuck Brewing Company's Neapolitan Milk Stout, 6% ABV on this one out of Douglas, Michigan. I was really impressed by this beer out of the gate, and as we go through the ranks, you will see that held true. The aroma on this was really nice. It wasn't as pungent as, say, a barley wine typically, or some of the really, really big imperial stouts, but at 6% with fewer fermentables in it, it was a really impressive aroma, well above average. I gave it a 7. The taste on this, honestly, it was exactly as advertised. Neapolitan milk stout. It was chocolate, vanilla, strawberry. It tasted like Neapolitan beer. I don't think they could possibly have done it any better. I gave the taste a perfect 10 out of 10. Body on this. Now, bearing in mind this is just a standard stout, but 6%, it's kind of high middle of the road for a standard stout, and I rather expected the body to be a bit more robust than it was. As it were, it was just kind of hovering in the average range. I gave it a 5. Mouthfeel on this. This was a really nice creamy stout, and that's kind of what I expect from a stout. Poured on tap or otherwise, and it did not disappoint. It was a perfect stout mouthfeel. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. For the finish, this had quite a long finish, considering only 6% ABV, not as many fermentables to really, get in there and create that staying power, but it really lasted a long time, and it was a nice even finish to it as well. well above average. It gets a 9. Head and retention. The head and retention on this one was not particularly great. It was just a little too effervescent. And again, pouring it home, not on a tap. You know, luck of the draw, that's just the way it is. But below average, it gets a 3. Appearance-wise, this was textbook stout. It wasn't pitch black. It's not an imperial. It's only a 6% standard stout. But it was perfectly smack in the range of what you expect to see. I gave it a perfect 10 out of 10. For balance, this was a very well balanced beer indeed. It was a wonderful, let me amend this. I appreciated for what they were doing with this, the balance, and I still stand by it was very well balanced. Really the ratio, as I explained when I was tasting it, was about 85 the strawberry vanilla chocolate to 15 malt. And for me, if you're going to make a milk stout and flavor it Neapolitan, that's about the right ratio. It still lets you enjoy all of it, but it was nice and balanced throughout, and you could taste every bit that went into this beer. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. Filling in the intangible, I absolutely loved it. I think Saugatuck accomplished exactly what they set out to do. 10 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, as a stout, as a milk stout, it would have been a very good stout indeed. But as soon as they made it a flavored milk stout and they absolutely nailed it, I mean, I can't dock any points. It was an absolute home run. 10 out of 10 for the example of the style. That brings the total score on the Saugatuck Brewing's Neapolitan Milk Stout to an 84 out of 100. That's very well above average. Highly recommend this one as a milk stout. It was very enjoyable indeed. Moving on to the Duck Rabbit. They're a milk stout, 5.7% ABV out of Farmville, North Carolina. The aroma on this one was very underwhelming. It was not pronounced at all. It was certainly below average in intensity of aroma. It gets a 3. For the taste, it was fine. That's about all I could say about it. It was fine. It was, for my money, on the lower end of average for a milk stout. There are plenty of offerings out there in the market that I would recommend before I recommended this one. It gets a 4. For the body, this was a very lackluster body. It was on the lower end of average. It wasn't bad, but it was certainly on the lower end of average. It was lesser even than the Saugatuck. It gets a 4. For the mouthfeel on this one was okay. It wasn't creamy like I expect from a non-dry stout, and it was just a bit too effervescent in the mouth, honestly, to really get that much out of it, and it didn't have much viscosity, so to speak. I give it the high end of average. I gave it a 6. For the finish on this one, this did not have a long finish at all. It was just kind of hovering as an average finish for an average beer, and it gets a 5. Head and retention, just like with the Saugatuck, it was just too effervescent. The head barely formed, and it just dissipated way too quickly and barely retained at all. It gets a 3. Appearance-wise, total 180 on this one. It was just like the Saugatuck. Perfect textbook for a stout. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Balance-wise, this was a well-balanced beer. The malts really came through nicely, and that sweet lactic quality that you expect from the added lactose in a milk stout also came through, and they really played equal parts, and I thought it was above average. I give it an 8 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, I liked the beer just fine, but it absolutely didn't blow me away by any stretch of the imagination. I didn't think it was awful. I didn't think it was great, and I rated it accordingly. Wholly average, 5 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, it gets another wholly average 5 out of 10. This beer wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It was just average. It was an average milk stout offering for my money. And if I'm really being objective, I mean, I like this beer. I think it's a fine beer, and probably if I didn't break down as methodically into categories, I would rate it higher. But when I'm being objective about it, it just had so many average and below average scores across various characteristics that go into building a great beer. I mean, the score came out how it did. Total score on this one's a 53 out of 100, so that falls squarely in the average range. Again, not a bad beer, not a great beer, just average. Plenty of other offerings out there I would recommend above this one. And that wraps today's review. I really enjoyed this one. And don't get me wrong, neither of these beers were bad. Even though there's a 31 point spread, this one I rated cleanly well above average, and I stand by that. And this one I rated wholly average, and I also stand by that. You know, the world of craft beer is vast, and there are a ton of offerings out there, and they are vying for your craft beer spending dollars. You know, I'm trying to explain to you and try as many as I can to get the information out to help you make an informed decision. And certainly you can make up your own mind. You may hate this one and think this is the best beer you ever had in your life, but that's the beauty of it. Craft beer is, I mean, there's thousands of offerings out there. Everybody just try and keep trying and trying until you find stuff you really, really like. You know, don't take my word for it. I'm just giving you my objective opinion. Nonetheless, that wrapped today's. I thought it was really fun. I'm going to be getting some more milk stouts. I know it's a hugely popular style. I haven't done that many milk stouts. I'm going to be getting more and keep doing more of these. As always, thank you so much for tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you have not already done so. Comments are really big. I'm not getting a lot of feedback. I very much would like it. What do you like? What do you dislike? What would you like me to do in future? What would you like me to bring in to get ranked? What would you like to see more of? What do you wish I would stop doing? Please let me know in the comments. I want to hear from you. If you are subscribed, you will probably get notified in the feed, but YouTube doesn't always do that. So please, if you're bad about remembering the drop dates, click the notification bell. It'll let you know right when our videos go live. Until next time, folks, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.